How's it going, folks? Stu here. Welcome to another review from the London Film Festival. We're in the thick of it at this point, hence the many different filming locations. I'm sat cross-legged like some kind of health guru. I'm not going to give you any kind of advice on your health. You die immediately. But still, muchos filmos to get through-os. Today's film is for the opening gala of the festival. Not the first one I saw, but the first one to open the ruddy festival for everyone. That film is Emerald Fennell's new one, Saltburn. And listen, I don't think I ever actually reviewed her previous film, Promising Young Woman, but I'm here to tell you, once and for all on the channel, was not a big fan of that film. So I didn't have huge expectations, if any at all, for Saltburn. But listen, we got a big cast. It's got a fun name, Saltburn, you know? Mysterious, salty, and burning. Has Emerald stepped up in the directing department on her sophomore feature, or is this another Stewie no likey? The answer is, I'm not sure she's for me, guys. I'm just not sure anymore. So Saltburn, as I said, latest one from Emerald Fennell, but previously directed Promising Young Woman. This is a sophomore feature, and it's got a pretty stacked cast. She's got Jacob elordi in here, Barry Keoghan, Rosamund Pike, Richard E. Grant, many good faces whom I enjoy watching on screens. And it's essentially a kind of fish out of water film set in 2006 of all time periods. What a year. He says not remembering what happened, but I'm sure it was a great one. We follow our central character as he begins at Oxford. I don't need to tell you, a prestigious university here in the UK, and gets wrapped up in a friendship with some, let's just say, some of the higher class students, of which there are many at Oxford. It's Oxford. And I've got to be honest, I really went into this wanting to enjoy it much more and to finally click with an Emerald Fennell piece. And I think it's better than Promising Young Woman in my books. I think it does do a lot of things better in many departments, but still, there are just one too many things that bug me about her directing sensibility that have happened in both her films so far. So I'm confident in saying that I think it's just a staple of her direction that just doesn't quite gel with me. And those issues all sort of conflate together into a general kind of lack of genuine edge, I think, for a filmmaker that seems to be convinced she is much more edgy than she actually is. And there's nothing that frustrates me more in films than directors that are almost telling you that they are a certain way, but not quite delivering on that. And in the case of Saltburn, what that ends up doing is setting up something which seems like it's got a lot of promise, and then as we go through the runtime, just sort of frustrating me more and more with the missteps it's taking and the things that just aren't gelling for me. It's not without its merits though. As I said, I enjoyed this more than her previous effort, and I think a lot of that comes down to the performances and the central characters of the film. They're all doing great work. Barry Keoghan is the lead here, and I love him as an actor. He is always just 100% committed to the roles he does, and they are always sort of different in their own strange ways. There's this kind of wickedness to him as a performer, which I think he taps into really, really well in his characters. He was great. I have no problems with his performance. And Jacob elordi as well really surprised me. I haven't seen him in anything outside of Euphoria at this point, so imagine my surprise when I found out he was a bloody Aussie, and he's British in this film. Very, very well, very convincingly so. I have to preface it, I do know what acting is, so like, it's great, different, but it's still crazy, right? Some people you just get attached to an accent in your head, and then they come out and they're not, it's not that. Why? I think he's really, really great, and alongside Barry, the two of them, their relationship is really strong in the film, and I think is what keeps it afloat whenever things really do get frustrating for me. The supporting cast aren't quite as strong as the central characters. They're not bad. Richard E. Grant and Rosamund Pike are the big names there, and what they're doing is good and works, but I think their performances sort of fall into one of the main things that frustrates me about the screenplay and the direction here overall, and that is just this kind of repetitiveness to it all. It kind of just repeats the same beats, the same sort of jokes, the same characteristics of certain characters throughout its runtime. And for me, that just felt a little bit lazy and frustrating, where I think the film thought it was being fun and edgy and provocative. It's obviously funny and silly to watch rich upper class people say nonsensical things that just are not of the same planet Earth as the rest of us. But to a certain extent, it just feels like Richard E. Grant and Rosamund Pike's lines are just endlessly recycled, silly, rich things to say, right? It's often quite funny, often quite repetitive and annoying, but never fully clicked for me and never felt too satisfying. But it all comes back to a very kind of broad and slightly more cliched take on things than I think the film thinks it's giving, if that makes much sense. I'm trying to say things without spoiling things. And it's what makes me feel like it's a director that is just kind of nudging you to be like, oh, look how nuts this is, eh? And as soon as I can feel a director doing that in a film, I have a tendency to kind of clock out a bit, and that's how it felt in the latter half of this film. I think it gets away with it a bit more than in her previous film, just purely because this is a film which is so clearly reveling in the kind of heightened nature of it all. I think it uses that to get away with a little bit more than I think it can get away with. But it is able to use some of that to get away with things. And it does help that it looks so good. This film is shot very, very well. Same cinematographer as La La Land. I'm going to have to check his name again because it's gone from my head. Linus Sandgren also did Babylon more recently as well. This dude knows how to shoot a film. This film is shot immaculately. And there are kind of like montages in the film which I think do feel quite delicious when it comes to the look of the thing and the actual form of the piece. On the whole, I like the way this thing moves through itself. It is consistently kind of watchable. But similarly, I think it can get quite lazy in its editing, in the way that it starts to piece things together. And towards the end of the film, it shows things that I don't think need to be shown, which is always just a crucial error for me in films. When something is suggested, we get it as an audience because we're not silly, we get it, and then it hammers it home by showing things or cutting to things or editing in different flashbacks. I don't need that shit, right? And this film is a big old culprit of that. And that's ultimately how I was left feeling about most of the film. It's so obvious, not just in a kind of guessing what's coming next, but literally it's just a bit too obvious in its themes and its approaches to those themes and the way it's showing those themes. I think that makes for an incredibly repetitive and gradually less satisfying watch overall. And I'm very disappointed that she sort of falls into the exact same trap of Promising Young Woman, which is that it all just kind of falls apart in the last 20 minutes. But what about you guys? Have you seen Saltburn? Did you catch it at the film festival? Or have you seen it elsewhere? Or maybe you're just excited to check it out. Let me know what you thought about it in the comments down below, and we will have a little chat-sees about it. I want to know your thoughts on the very end of this one. If you've seen it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see me talk about more shit, go ahead and click subscribe. The button is down there for that, as well as links to my socials, my Twitter, my letterbox. We can get up-to-date thoughts on films throughout the festival and the year if you want. Go ahead and click. It's fun, I guess, maybe. I will see you guys very, very soon for some more thoughts on more films. But until next time, I still can't believe that Jacob Elordi's Aussie. I'm never getting over it. Madness. Absolute scenes.